Our favorite thing, like if I had to write down my skill set on a resume, I would put book recommending on there.
Yes, it's been a while since we did this, so this is we
used to do this on every episode, but we realized we'd gotten a little too repetitive with it. So this is perfect. I think we're in our element here.
I think so too.
We wanted to do this one more time with the Kamigawa Food Detectives, because here's the nightmare, right?
It's such a funny series of events how this happened.
It's such a funny series of events. I talked about reading it or wanting to start it, or like I just bought it.
Yeah.
And clearly Kat listened to that episode and then bought this book and then read it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping Kat loved it. And it's possible because a lot of people loved it.
Yeah.
But we'd already, the day before this all went down, recorded the podcast episode where I was like, I didn't really like this book. And so now I'm like, God, that's the nightmare, isn't it? When you mention a book on the podcast and then you end up not really liking it and a bunch of other people went out and bought it.
Yeah.
And I was like, there are so many other cozy books that I would recommend over this one. Mm-hmm. So we were like, let's do that too.
Yeah.
So how about you start us off, Raylene? What did you pick for that one?
I had a lot of fun with this. Obviously, I love cat books and I love books about food. So I was kind of like, okay, I got this. Let's lean in. So the first one is one that you're probably also going to mention, which is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This one is perfect for a lot of reasons. I feel like
it's so good.
I feel like that book wanted to be this book, I think, is the problem. So in Before the Coffee Gets Cold, we've got a cafe that has a kind of magical element. There's this one seat where if you sit down and drink a coffee there, you'll be transported back in time, and you can kind of take a look at something that happened in your life. You can't change anything in the past, but you can kind of see it and kind of reflect and maybe grow from it. And so you've got 4 kind of little stories that follow 4 different people and what they go back and see and how it affects them. So it does have that reflective aspect that the Kamigawa Food Detectives has, where it's like, okay, I'm thinking about this thing from my past. I want to go back to it. Whatever. But I feel like this book, I haven't read that book, but I feel like this does it in a better way, and it's very interesting and a very emotional book. One,
in the bottom of the synopsis for this one, it literally says, it's a mouth-watering celebration of good company and the power of a delicious meal for fans of Before the Coffee Gets
it makes
cold.
Sense. It's
so you're rooting back to read the original.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good place to start.
It's even Raylene going for similar colors.
It's true. It's got a cat, the colors.
I do love this cover.
I do too. I still kind of want it, even though I know I might not love it. I do want to own that book.
I do want to make clear, if people are listening to this episode and didn't listen to my full review last week, I didn't hate it by any means. Yeah. I did enjoy it, and I read the whole thing. I didn't give up on it. Like I didn't DNF on it. I did enjoy certain aspects of it. I just had quite a few things where I was like, I don't know, this wasn't perfect.
Mm-hmm, totally.
Yeah. Anyways, what else did you pick?
Yes, so the next book I picked is Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, because this one has the food aspect, but also is very character focused, which I think was one of the main issues with the Kamigawa Food Detectives for you. It didn't really focus on the main characters very much. There wasn't a lot of character growth. This one, the main character is a young woman who is orphaned and is kind of feeling lost, just floating through her life, and she gets taken in by her friend and his mom, and they just hang out, and she loves to cook, and so it has those kind of cozy vibes, but also is about grief and family and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really short book too. But I don't talk about this book too often, but when I read it, I really, really enjoyed it. But then the last book I wanted to recommend is another one that I feel like is just a perfect recommendation for this, and that is If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Kawamura. This is one that I read a long time ago. I think I read it on episode 3 or 4 of the podcast, so it's been a while.
Oh wow!
It's one of my oldest reads.
230 episodes ago.
People might have forgotten, so I'm bringing it back. So with this one, the main character is a man who finds out he only has a week to live, I think, or something like that. He finds out he has very little time left, and this guy shows up who's like, hey, you can make a deal with me if you want, where if you eliminate one thing from the world each day, I'll give you an extra day. I'll let you live for one more day. And so he kind of starts by just eliminating small things that seem small, and then kind of seeing how it affects the world and stuff. And throughout the whole thing, he has a pet cat, and so he's kind of like, what would happen if cats disappeared from the world? What would that do to things? And so it's also kind of about like coming to terms with dying, and so it's very it's quite somber and dramatic, but it has that kind of magical element as well that's like, well, what would happen if this happened, and like kind of reflecting on your life and things like that. But it also is a cat book, and I feel like we really needed to lean into a cat book with these recommendations because the Kamigawa Food Detectives has a cat but isn't necessarily like a cat book. But that's what I'm here for, to recommend the cat books. So there you go.
You truly are the queen of cat books. Yes. Okay. So the ones that I picked also, like we said, Before the Coffee Gets Cold. But then I also did pick Days at the Morisaki Bookshop, which I read last year. And I just flew through. I really breezed through this one. And while I don't think it's a perfect book, it really hit the spot for this genre of cozy Japanese translated. And there was a slight cut there because my plumber came, which is exciting. Real throwback to the beginning of this episode where I said I have a million things that have broken all at once. But yeah, I was in the middle of talking about Days at the Morisaki Bookshop. It hits that sweet spot of a gentle, cozy, happy book where there is not a lot of tension and there isn't a lot of conflict, but you still do have a light and interesting story happen for this main character. And it's so cozy because it's set in a bookshop and you've got this like great uncle character. I really did enjoy it. And it felt like kind of watching a rom-com where there isn't really a romance, but I just mean where you watch it and you feel content and you're like, that was nice. So this hits that spot. But I had one more, and it is The Hole by Hiroko Oyamada. You know, I loved this book. And me reading this book is what got both of us reading a bunch of this author's books, because we now really like this author. I was like, this isn't the coziest book, but I felt like I would put this right in between The Food Detectives and The True Deceiver.
Ooh, that's a good point. It's the perfect marriage.
This was my bridge book. So I was like, okay, it's got some of this happy and interesting Japanese translated vibes, but it is a little fairy tale-esque. Like this girl falls through a hole, sort of. Like there's this like weird fairy tale thing going on that goes on in this book.
Right.
But then you've got the like spooky, eerie, what the hell's going on of
Lone
this
woman
of
kind
the
of
True
vibe.
Detective or the True Detective, True Deceiver.
Different vibe.
And I love this book, so I was like, I gotta sneak it in.
You gotta sneak it in.
So there you go. Those are our recommendations. What a fun episode. We had so much fun doing our special buddy read of that other book, of The True Deceiver. But we also had I had so much fun picking out all of these recommendations.
Me too. So. It's been too long, so it was fun to flex that muscle again.